The dense fog clung to the mountains as Slumach hiked through the thick forests of British Columbia, his fingers gripping a worn leather pouch. Inside, raw gold nuggets glistened, their weight a burden only he could carry. He had discovered something legendary, a gold vein so rich it could change a man's fate forever. But he had no intention of sharing it. Slumach was an enigma, a solitary figure feared by many. He would occasionally appear in the nearby settlements, pockets heavy with gold, trading for supplies. Whispers followed him. Where was he finding such wealth? He never answered, only offering a cold smile before disappearing back into the wilderness. But gold breeds greed, and soon enough, the questions turned to threats. The story of Slumach's gold first began to spread in the late 1850s when rumors of untapped riches in the Western Territories sent countless prospectors flocking to the region. Many returned empty-handed, but there were whispers, hushed conversations in the dim glow of campfires, of a hidden vein, richer than any before it. Slumach, a reclusive indigenous man, seemed to be the only one who knew where it lay. He was not always alone. There were stories of a few who had followed him, men eager to discover his secret. But none of them ever returned. Some claimed they had perished in the wild, their bodies lost to the deep ravines and raging rivers of the Pitt Lake region. Others believed they had been murdered, their throats slit under the cover of night, their bodies buried beneath the trees. Those who dared ask Slumach where the others had gone were met with silence or a knowing glare that froze them in place. In 1869, a group of American prospectors arrived in New Westminster, boasting about a hidden mine they had learned of from an old man in the mountains. They planned an expedition, hiring local guides and gathering enough supplies to last them months. Weeks passed with no word. Months dragged on, and still no sign of them. Finally, in the spring of the following year, a single man stumbled into town, his face gaunt, his eyes wild with terror. His clothes were torn and his hands shook violently. He never spoke of what had happened in the mountains. He only muttered one thing before vanishing into obscurity. "The gold is cursed." The late 1870s saw an influx of miners who were drawn to British Columbia's wilderness by the promise of wealth. Many sought Slumach's gold, though most never returned. Those who did spoke of eerie lights in the trees, strange whispering voices, and an overwhelming sense of dread that sent even the most hardened prospectors fleeing. A handful of them, determined to resist superstition, met gruesome ends. Some found with their bodies mutilated, others simply vanished into the wilderness without a trace. By the 1880s, experienced mountain men and explorers had started to document their attempts at finding the legendary mine. Newspapers of the time carried occasional reports of disappearances, warning adventurers to stay away from Pitt Lake. One notable account came from an old trapper who claimed to have seen Slumach himself guiding a group of men into the mountains, none of whom were ever seen again. They followed him, greedy as the devil himself, the trapper would later recount. He led them to their graves. One fateful evening in 1890, Slumach was arrested. The charge? Murder. The details were murky, tangled in the same mystery that surrounded his every move. Some said he had killed a man in cold blood, others believed it was self-defense, but the court saw only a guilty man, and the sentence was death. As he stood on the gallows, he uttered his final words, "Nema lo ele," believed to mean, "No one shall find it." After his execution, the legend of Slumach's lost gold mine exploded. Treasure hunters, prospectors, and desperate men flocked to Pitt Lake, determined to uncover his secret. But the mountain had its own plans. Those who went searching often never returned, their bodies lost to the merciless landscape. Those who did make it back spoke of eerie occurrences, equipment vanishing overnight, strange figures watching from the tree line, sudden storms forcing them to retreat. Some even believed Slumach's curse was real. In the 1930s, an old prospector named Jackson claimed to have found the mine. He staggered into town, feverish and delirious, his hands clutching chunks of gold. "I found it!" he raved. But before he could lead anyone back, he died under mysterious circumstances. His map vanished, and with it, the last known clue to the lost treasure. Another tale emerged in the 1950s when a group of prospectors ventured into the Pitt Lake region. They were well prepared, equipped with maps, advanced tools, and enough supplies to last them months. But only one man returned. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken with terror. He spoke little of what had happened, only muttering that something had been watching them. The rest of the team was never found. Their camp was discovered abandoned, with personal belongings strewn about, as if they had fled in panic. Some believe they were victims of the curse, others think they fell prey to the unforgiving landscape. Then there was the case of the lone traveler in the 1970s, a modern-day explorer who had devoted his life to tracking down Slumach's gold. He meticulously followed every rumor, every whispered tale passed down from old prospectors. One day, he set off into the wilderness and never came back. His car was found at a remote trailhead, his supplies neatly packed inside. No trace of him was ever found, and his disappearance remains one of the many unsolved mysteries of the Pitt Lake region. In the late 1980s, yet another group set out, this time with modern equipment and satellite tracking. They were convinced that new technology would succeed where others had failed. For days, they explored treacherous terrain, encountering landslides and nearly impassable paths. Then, inexplicably, their radio contact ceased. A rescue team was dispatched, but they found no signs of the men. What they did find was their base camp, untouched, gear still arranged neatly, but not a single clue to suggest where the explorers had gone. It was as if they had simply vanished into the mountains. The 1990s saw increased interest in the mine, with multiple expeditions sponsored by private investors. One well-funded search party included experienced survivalists, geologists, and treasure hunters. They planned to cover the entire Pitt Lake region over the course of several months. Halfway through the expedition, they sent a message back to their main base, stating that they had found something incredible. Excitement rippled through the team's contacts, but the next message never came. When rescue workers arrived weeks later, all they found was abandoned equipment and a single, hastily scribbled note: "It watches." In 2007, a documentary crew attempted to uncover the truth behind Slumach's lost gold, retracing the steps of past search parties. They documented eerie, unexplained sounds at night, strange temperature shifts, and electronic equipment failing for no apparent reason. One member of the crew, an experienced mountaineer, claimed to have seen a shadowy figure lurking in the distance, though no footprints or evidence of another presence could be found. Despite weeks of searching, they left without any proof of the mine's existence, but their footage captured enough strange occurrences to reignite public fascination. To this day, the legend of Slumach's gold persists. Historians continue to debate whether the mine was ever real, while treasure hunters still brave the rugged wilderness, hoping to find the fabled riches. Yet the warnings remain. Those who seek the treasure often do not return. And if Slumach's curse is true, then the price of gold may be more than just one's sanity. It may be their very soul.